Okay, well, let's pick up where we left off last time. Now, we've already talked about if we select one on the left. We've already talked about if we delete. So let's go on to the add products. Now, if I look at the code, when I click on add products, it takes me to an area that will be allowing to go back to the index and view them, or add a product here. So let's look at the code. Now, at the bottom of the index, it has an href that simply takes me to the file, the PHP file, that executes the adding a product. Now this one goes to the form. So let's go open the add product form. Now again, we start this off with PHP and we have to make sure that we pull up the correct items that we can look at. So we do our database connectivity. Remember, we've got our require that will pull this into our code. Now in here, we're going to select all categories by category and order it by category ID. So I'm bringing them all up. Why would I bring up the categories? Well, if we look at our display, notice the category allows us to select. I'm not going to any place that I can take entry or free-form entry away from the user and make them select from something I want them to select from, I'm going to do it. Take out the human element and you take out errors. So let's go back here. Now, once I, again, get my query, prepare it, execute it, get all of them, and then close the cursor. They're sitting there inside my categories array, ready for me to work with. Now, as I go down to my HTML, it's a straight HTML listing. Whenever I have my add product that I'm going to work with on my form, that I'm going to enter the information, the action is just add the product. That's going to execute the PHP that will go and run my SQL and add the product to my database. And I have my ID. Now notice here on categories, I have to switch over to my PHP because previously I ran a query that created my array of all categories. I have to switch back and forth between HTML and PHP because to order a select, I have my options, and the values is going to be my individual elements of my array of category. Individual of the array. And I'm going to list the ID and the name. And then I end. I go through and I have the rest of my inputs for my product. And again, I can go back and list my product list. Plus, I should be able to go through and add. So let's go through it. My bases, my code, I'm going to add basic, just something that I can put in here. Oh, sorry, this is the code. So BAS and basic bases and 85.25. Add the product, and it automatically goes and lists everything for just the bases. All right. And of course, I can still go through and delete them. Now let's go back and look at my code. From here, when I click on that, it goes to the add product. So I go through and I get all that was inputted by the user. And on some of them, I'm going to validate. If they don't pull out correctly, these will be filled with a false. If I didn't enter anything, it'll be a null. So I check both. And then I check to make sure everything is entered. Otherwise, invalid product, bring up the error code. Else, require once, get the database code in there, unless I've already got it in. And now here's my query. I'm inserting. And I'm inserting into my products all the fields I want inserted with where the values coming through. These are the values that I have previously. prepare it. Now remember, every time we have to make sure that a variable is bound to the database, we have to bind the value. And here is my variable ID. I'm sorry, yes, to my actual database field on every single one of them. Okay. Close it. I'm sorry, execute it, close it, and it's added. It's that simple. And then I go back to my index so it will list all of them. And if a category has been selected, remember on my index, it will only use the category that's been selected. Otherwise, we're back to null or false if it does not work. Otherwise, if I don't have a category, it goes after them all. Now, that's the part of my add all through here. Now we have our list categories. And as I mentioned earlier, that's not working right now. So I want you to take a minute to see if you can, from your index, pull up the categories list. It already does it actually. You'll need to go into the categories list and make it so that all of your categories list here in a table. Now, we've looked at the code that already can do that. So just make sure that you have it correct. If we pull up our categories list, let's go get it. It already has the code to go out and get the database, to pull in all of the categories and create the array. So I'm not making you create the query to pull them up. All you need to do is add the code for the table, and to add a category, put the code in here to add a category. Two different ones. So take a moment, see if you can get the table to work. Remember, you're working with an array. So if I want to go through all the elements of an array, what is the structure I need to use? Take a moment, see if you can figure it out. When you either get it done or have reached the point where you need help, continue on. Okay, so we know that in our table we have our first row that has two columns. One that expects the name, the next expects a blank as the header. Okay, now let's go ahead and go look at this. In order to work with this, remember, if we look back at our product or even our index, we know that we're going to have to do a for each to cycle through. So even if you wanted to just do the HTML structure, because we know that we're going to have a new row, we know within a part of this we're going to have to end the row, and within each row we're going to have our open and close structure for each column. Now this is just for the HTML structure, but now I want many rows. So within that structure, I'm going to have my PHP for each. And remember, our array name is categories. That was filled from our query. And our individual we're going to call category. And again, end our area. Okay? Now this line doesn't end, so I don't put the semicolon here, just like regular. Now, we have our TR. Now, within the TD, we're pulling from a variable or an array. So we have to switch over here and tell it, again, PHP, and we're going to echo our individual. And what is the field name we want? What's the field name? And we end our execution. Now we have to end our PHP. Now that's the one we have for this row that is going to display. Now, in order to work with any type of information here, like this is a list, if we also want to add our delete, just like we did our other, then again, we have to have a form in this TD. Okay, you could stop and check it now just to make sure that you list all of your category names. So we could stop here, save it, execute it, and make sure it works. But remember, outside the row that ends this, we have to make sure that we end our PHP, but we are ending the for each. Okay, so open and close. Here's our PHP that wraps around all this in our for each. And we could indent these a little if you wanted to. Now you could stop, save it, execute it, and make sure that it works. Unless I've got a typo here, I know the structure's correct. Now again, if we are wanting to add a delete button inside our table, just like we did inside of our product list, then we would have to go in here and say, all right, we have to have a form so we can have a delete button. We also have to have the category field so we'll know which one we're pulling. But remember, just like the others, it is hidden. So I could say I have a form, and my action is going to be my delete category. Method is going to be a post. Okay. Now if I continue on down, I've got to give it an ID. And where am I coming from here? And end it. Oh, I'm sorry, not end it. Then we got to give it, oh yes, sorry. We're going to end the form itself here. We're continuing the TD though till the end. So notice I'm going to line it up with my open TD here. Okay. Now I'm going to do the rest of my form. I got to do my input. My type is, remember, hidden. Because remember, they're right there. My name is going to be the category ID. Because I got to pull the ID through if I'm going to delete it. And then I have my value is going to be, and remember, this is going to be the ID that I've already pulled through, that I've landed on, that I'm going to delete. I click on the delete, that's the value. So I've got to start off and tell it, yes, I'm doing PHP here. And it is the category ID, or the field name that is used in that table. I'm going to end my PHP. And then I've got to have my submit button, of course. So here, my input type is submit, and my value is delete. That'll show up on the button. And now we can end our form. And if we wanted to look again to see how this looks, You can save it, pull it up, and it should look exactly like the one that we pulled up here. So I can go in and pull up my exact, and this is what I'd get when I list my categories. Delete, delete, delete. I can also add a particular category. And I can also go back to my list products. So we're basically doing the same thing, structure, as our product list, to where we can delete an individual or add if we want to go to a form. We're just doing both inside one. Now there's a few other things you could do. You could go in and work with adding an edit button to it if you wanted, but it's going to again be another repetitious to where we want to edit what's already there. It's a matter of performing the correct query and keeping the information that you select, but it'll be just like the delete as far as taking the base, the drum, or the sax, or the category through. You can try it, and if you have any issues with it, just get in contact with me and I can help you out with it. Or if needed, I can do a video on how to add another button here. Thank you. Now you're ready for the next assignment.